Social media has become the downfall for several candidates in this election campaign. It's becoming more common where we see candidates who've resigned over inappropriate social media posts or because they failed to provide accurate information during the vetting process. Joining us this morning from Ottawa is publisher of punditsguide.ca, Alice Funke. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Beverly.
Well, let me ask you about this. I mean, because we're in the neighborhood of about 19 different candidates in this federal election alone. So it does, beg the question about the vetting process. Is it too unwieldy to think that these parties would go through years of social media posts?
If you ever want to do an exercise, Beverly, vet yourself. I don't know how long you've been on Facebook or Twitter, but I mean, it would take me ages to read back to everything I had written. I suspect that there is an opening for an entrepreneur to come up with a technological solution. Certainly, I think the social media organizations may have to offer some options for people to shut down their profile, search their profile, because it's quite unwieldy. And there's one fellow who set up a volunteer war room of 20 people who are spending all day, every day, combing through the social media presences of all these candidates. That's a lot of time to take for each person, but my goodness.
And it raises all kinds of conversations about what would be acceptable and what wouldn't be. I mean, if you're talking about a candidate who, years ago, I don't know, was seen drinking or seen doing something a little different than maybe racism, but how does the party decide what's acceptable and how long ago is there a statute of limitations on some of these things?
Well, let's remember the major role of a political party in our system is to identify, recruit, train, and run the campaigns for these candidates that we get to choose amongst on election day. And they have to make some judgment calls in spite of the daily news cycle. But the daily news cycle does drive some of it. And, on balance, I think they have done a good job keeping their eye on, their bigger goal. But there's some days where a third or fourth candidate needing to step down would be too much. And, sometimes they'll go for an apology. Sometimes they'll take resignation. But they're trying their best.
And we know that people are also searching for it. So there's, the party would do some vetting, of course, but then maybe opposition parties will be looking for some things like this online to discredit other candidates.
Yes, this is something that really we came into in full gear in Canada in 2008, that the political parties would vet their own candidates and then they would vet the other ones. And I sort of called that the airing of the grievances. But the new development we've seen in this election is two distinct groups of citizens who have decided for one reason or another to start vetting everybody. And in fact, they are still publishing details of candidates who had already stepped down. There's one gentleman and his crew that have an agenda to expose the views of conservative candidates that they find unacceptable. He's got a First Nations background. And then there's another crew from Montreal and Harvard who are just going after everybody. And they've each landed some punches. But I wonder if, they're racking up a score a little bit.
Yeah, well, interesting. 19 candidates so far. Alice, thank you for being on the show this morning.
Oh, thanks for having me.